Hello world, I'm Denise. Thank you for joining me on my channel Under My Vine and Fig Tree. Today I want to unpack two verses in Revelation chapter 13 verses 11 and 12 and show how they illuminate details in the rest of the passage of Revelation 13 and 14, how they point to specific and give amazing clues, and astonishingly how our South African flag unlocks the picture. I kid you not. So the two verses then say, in verse 11, "Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had two horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. He exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed." So now we have to jump back to see who was that first beast whose fatal wound had been healed. And Revelation chapter 13 starts talking about the beast out of the sea. And it says that this beast had 10 horns and 7 heads, 10 crowns on its horns, and each head a blasphemous name. And in verse 3, it says, "One of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast." The identity of the beast with the fatal wound that had been healed is thus a part of the first beast. And I'm understanding about the horsemen of the apocalypse, the 4 horses who are sent out at the opening of the seals, are clues to what this is all about. Now, I don't necessarily subscribe to the timeline of a 7 years over those 4 horses. Those horses who are released, the first horse that rides out is the white horse, and the rider is wearing a crown and carrying a bow, and it is bent on conquest. And so if we are tethered to a 7-year timeline, we won't see this. But I'm understanding from the first reading of this, I got the understanding that this ties to the going out into the nations, the great era of the great exploration. This goes back to the 1400s and perhaps before, but going out onto the seas to the New World and to conquering and basically a race to find the new continents, to find the new world, and to colonize those. And what happened was then the economies were built with the wealth going back to that heartland that sent out those ships, those explorers, and so on. And so this connects to me by understanding the first beast. And so looking at that picture, it has become the Britannia rules the waves. Where does Britannia come from? Britannia is the British Empire, okay, and it considers itself as ruling the waves. But Britain, not Britain itself, the British Empire is the latest form of the Roman Empire. The Romans were the last of the vision that Daniel had regarding Babylon. Remember Nebuchadnezzar's statue? There was the Babylonians who would be conquered by the Medes, and the Persians who would be conquered by the Greeks, who would be conquered by the Romans. And the Roman Empire has not gone away. It has remained to this day, but changed form somewhat. So it became the British Empire kind of largely took over the Roman Empire and has continued that rule. So Britannia rules the waves equates to me as being the first beast. Coming out of that would be this beast whose fatal wound had been healed. And so what fatal wound did it receive? Well, who did the Babylonians conquer in the first place? The Assyrians. Okay, so the Assyrians were conquered by Babylon and took over their entire empire. Babylon was then conquered by the Medes and the Persians who came after them. So it had already risen up. And in the British Empire, the Persia rose to ascendancy because of its oil, because of the products that were there. The British went after that wealth, and Persia became Iran. And I'm understanding that to be this beast whose fatal wound had been healed. The picture just makes sense to me. So then, looking at the other beast coming out of the earth that had two horns like a lamb but spoke like a dragon, where have we seen this idea of speaking like a dragon, or something along those lines? A dragon roars. Where have we seen the dragon roar? Have we ever seen the roaring? It's mentioned in Isaiah chapter 17 and in verses 12 and 13, but I'll read to 14. Oh, the raging of many nations, they rage like the raging sea. Oh, the uproar of the peoples, they roar like the roaring of great waters. Although the peoples roar like the roar of surging waters, when he rebukes them, they flee far away. Driven before the wind like chaff on the hills, like tumbleweed before a gale. In the evening, sudden terror. Before the morning, they are gone. This is the portion of those who loot us, the lot of those who plunder us. And there's some interesting warnings there tied to this. But this picture of this, when the nations roar like the sea, and so we have this picture, a dragon would speak like that, would roar like that. So when I have read this, from the first time I read Isaiah 17, I immediately had the picture of an event where there's a stadium or more full of people. People are watching on televisions. It's a global event. What would that be? A soccer World Cup, a rugby World Cup, a Olympics meeting. And so I've always watched those with interest to see, what's going on in the timeline around that. And it's fascinating that there have been linked events to some of those. Now, in very recent times, we have had the South African Rugby World, not the South African, but the Rugby World Cup, which South Africa won in 2023 on the 28th of October. At that time, again, there was great cheering. Now, who won the World Cup? The Springboks. What does a Springbok look like? It's a buck with two short horns. Now, this beast then says he had two horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. And a Springbok is definitely not going to make any kind of noise. It is more lamb-like. Now, I'm not calling the Springboks a beast. Please, please don't get that idea at all. They're a representation. The Springbok is a representation, and the cheer and the chant that went out at the time was Bokke. South Africans were cheering for the Bokke and many other peoples who support South Africa. And so there's an identity here that links to South Africa. That's where I'm coming. That's what I'm coming to, and that's what I'm pointing at. Something tied to South Africa is quite important in this picture. It says then, this dragon, he exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. So they kind of gave their authority to the first beast, but the first beast whose fatal wound had been healed. So who was that? We identified that as this picture of Assyria, Persia, Iran, this concept, but it's tied to a people group. And when I looked at our flag, now there's something that unlocked this for me in astonishing detail. It was the 30th of October, 2 days after the World Cup. Our president had announced that he was going to be making an announcement in the evening, and I was nervous what that was going to be. And I set out to pray over whatever it was going to be, because on the 9th of October, our president had announced that South Africa supported the events of October 7th. That totally floored so many of us South Africans. We were shocked to our core. Those atrocious events that happened when Hamas attacked Israel on the 7th of October 2023, the world cried out against, and South Africa supported it, against the will of the people. Well, a lot of the people. And we felt entirely betrayed. So when the president made this announcement that he was going to be addressing the nation, I felt uneasy and decided I was going to set a number of days of prayer aside to pray over this, whatever it would be, which I did, and which in this moment, this picture unfolded, and I'll share it in just a moment. But when the president spoke later after my prayer, he announced that they were bringing in the Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, and it has come as part of the National Development Plan, which was put into action in 2020 as the way forward for the country through and beyond COVID. And he spoke of budgetary initiatives and linked all of this as the next stage, moving forward, stronger together. And he was using the motto of the Springboks in the rugby team's motto is stronger together, moving forward, stronger together. And that now connects this to this beast. So I was kneeling on the floor. I'd taken the South African flag and I'd laid it on the floor, and I was praying over it, praying Psalm 27. And all of a sudden, this picture unfolded. It became crystal clear for me. So, understand on the flag, okay, this South African flag has a red, white, and blue. And those are the colors of the sort of Britannia nations, a family of nations that have the red, white, and blue. From historical roots, those colors are in their flag because they have that historical root. And there's another group that bear these colors of the black, yellow, green, and red, some of them with a bit of white. This is quite astonishing. But when I looked at this flag, take a look. What can you see? The red, white, and blue giving birth to this other picture. So there's a transition from the one to the other, giving its power and authority to this other one. So we have the picture of two beasts on our South African flag. Can you believe it? So this is my interpretation, but I was praying about it. The Lord just opened my eyes in that moment, at that time. Now, I mentioned the white horse that had ridden out, and I understand that the red horse and the black horse were all a part of those first seals and that first rule Britannia sort of concept, that empire era. And it was a period of economic harvesting for the beast system, if I can put it that way. The pale horse is, I believe, equated to the second beast. And I say that because there's a whole changed dimension, a changed picture. The pale horse, which is the fourth of the horses, is sometimes called the green horse. And it's called either of those because of the Greek word chloros, which was the earliest, it was written in Greek, chloros, horse. And that chloros links to both chlorophyll, which is the green element in plants, and chlorine, which bleaches living things. And so the picture, now listen to what the pale horse says about the pale horse. I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, come, I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. I'm seeing that this pale or green horse, because chlorine kills living things, that there's this picture of pale, undead creatures or dead creatures, that there's a spiritual element to this, an unfriendly spiritual element to this. It's not a safe spiritual element. Okay, so these details link. This seems to tie very strongly to what this group represent, their modus operandi, the way that they operate, and their goals and intentions. So moving on then from those details, looking further, there's another element that comes in, and that is the 666 that comes in, the mark of the beast, the number of the beast. And it says in verse 18 of chapter 13, this calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666. And it's generally been understood that by gematria, one could add up the letters in the person's name, and it would reveal the number 666, and it would identify this person who is the beast. But I'm seeing it from a different perspective, that to calculate the number of the beast is to work out, to calculate by logic, to figure out. And it needn't be a calculation by addition. And so there's a picture that emerges that links again to South Africa. And this is where the idea may upset many people. And that is because we mentioned someone very famous. Here we go. You recognize Nelson Mandela. And when he died, the world adored him. He was lauded, and everybody was calling him my president. And that headline showed president of the world. A lot of people accepted that as what they wanted so much. When Nelson Mandela was imprisoned, his cell number given to him was 46664. And the reason how that was made was he was prisoner number 466 in the register and imprisoned in 1964. So it was 466 of 64. And this is allegedly how the cell number, how Nelson Mandela's number was 46664. And you would recall that many initiatives had taken place under that name, under that banner of 46664, fundraising events, all sorts of things internationally. People chose that as an identity for themselves. They wanted to be identified with that number. Now, something that shines a light into this, very interestingly, which shows me that this is a composite. It's not just one man. I'm not targeting a man as rather a composite identity. When Nelson Mandela would have turned 100 years old, that was 2018. He was born in 1918, and in 2018, there's an annual lecture that is given each year on the anniversary of Nelson Mandela's birthday. This one was just the day before, the 17th of July of 2018. And Barak Obama was asked by Graça Machel, who was Nelson Mandela's widow, to come and speak at that event, which he did. And you can find the video online. It's called the 16th Annual Nelson Mandela Memorial Lecture. And the transcript is also available. And he spoke with reluctance. He said that he was forced to do this. He didn't want to actually give this address, but he spoke of how Nelson Mandela had inspired him and in the civil rights movement and a lot of those sort of ideas, and how that came forward out of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. So this theme was carried forward, and in the later part of the speech, Barack Obama gave the guideposts for the road ahead, and he named 5 goals. I didn't write fast enough to get them all down, but a listed was universal freedom, universal health care, universal income, and he spoke of social justice, and he spoke of the sustainable development goals. Now, a fascinating detail at this event, I made sure I raced home to watch it. Being July, it's winter time, and the weather was pretty foul. It was cold and miserable in the stadium where this event was happening, and the officials of the going around helping people find their seats, the ushers, everybody were wearing 4664 t-shirts. The numbers were written across their chests, 4664. But because the weather was cold, many of them put on sports jackets, and the sports jackets hid the 4 on either side, and so these people were strutting about with 666 emblazoned across their chests. They absolutely were. I witnessed this with my own eyes, and I hope that it hasn't been edited out of any of the videos. I really had a good laugh there. But what was fascinating is that President Obama is president number 44. Out of the mouth of 44 came the words of 666. That's my understanding. At least the foundational statement, but I believe he was reluctant to release it at that time because he felt that it wasn't the right time. It wasn't ready for its release. That's my thinking. Now, that was in 2018. We're coming up for a 7-year anniversary of that speech. Sobering thought. Now, you might say, okay, all this sounds, it's circumstantial. Have you got anything else? So I've been praying for South Africa out of concern for South Africa. When the state capture information was started to come out and other details came out, I was very, very concerned for South Africa, and I've been praying very fervently for our country. And in 2017, I set upon a 7-day prayer time for the country. It was the first time I'd ever done this, and it just seemed like because it was suggested actually by somebody that we but at the same time we agreed to pray. And only one lady and myself agreed, but it was a Facebook post, and maybe others did so quietly, but it was never revealed if they did. We prayed for 7 days. My prayer was for God to deliver South Africa out of captivity. That's where we were at. I had no idea, no clue of who an enemy might be. I was simply praying for South Africa to be delivered out of captivity. On the 8th day, a huge gale blew up and ripped through Durban, 70 kilometers per hour gale force winds. And there was a big storm as well. And going outside at a particular time, there was a fabulous rainbow over our house, and it was in multiples of rainbow right over our whole house. It was the most beautiful thing in its positioning. And on the following day, in the newspaper, there was a picture of the damage that had been caused by this 70 kilometer per hour wind. And look at this. That is the West Street Mosque. Its dome was blown over. Okay, there's the date. The report on the 19th of August that this dome was blown over, toppled in that fierce wind of the 18th. Now, I didn't realize at the time that that identified this enemy, but recent events have made that abundantly clear. And so it was quite exciting to, quite horrifying, but an exciting thing. I written when this flag detail emerged, I said, wow, the equipping came back then, 2017, but the filters have only now been put in place. When we filter using Jesus-shaped mesh, the correct message is received. And so taking the time to see this has been quite amazing. Now, I'm sure there's a lot more to unpack with regard to this, but going on from that mosque dome being toppled, let's go back to these words in Isaiah chapter 17, that, oh, the raging of many nations, they rage like the raging sea. Oh, the uproar of the peoples, they roar like the roaring of great waters. Just today, the 20th of October, 2025, Hamas have had some hostages. They've handed some hostages back, Israeli hostages back, and they've had a bunch of their own prisoners released. And a report has gone out that they are cheering like they have won the World Cup. This for me was confirmation that this message is true. Although verse 13 of Isaiah 17, although the peoples roar like the roar of surging waters, when he rebukes them, they flee far away, driven before the wind like chaff on the hills, like tumbleweed before a gale. In the evening, sudden terror. Before the morning, they are gone. This is the portion of those who loot us, the lot of those who plunder us. They must be careful in their cheering, because something is coming, because the Lord does look after Israel. So I believe that this word has been prayed for by somebody. I believe that it is an affirmation for somebody, and is the reason that it was confirmed to me to release this message. I pray that you would measure it, weigh it, see how it filters according to your understandings, your belief. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you in the next video. God bless you. Take care.